A woman returns undercover to the luxury empire she created, only to find it rotting from the inside. Mocked by her own staff, she prepares to burn it all down with truth. Watch what unfolds when they forget one thing. Don't judge a book by its cover. Savannah, Georgia, a southern city suffocating in mid-July, where the heat seemed to mix with the dust of time clinging to every brick on the sidewalk. Danielle Hartley sat inside an old Chevy Malibu, parked diagonally across the street, tapping a slow rhythm on the faded steering wheel. She wasn't wearing her usual Italian leather handbag, no glossy heels, no jewelry, except for a cheap gas station watch she bought in a rush the day before. Her thick brown hair was loosely tied and tucked under a worn baseball cap. An oversized t-shirt, faded jeans, and frayed sneakers, ones that followed her since her days selling cars in an empty lot. She stared out the window to her Hartley Auto House, her flagship showroom, once her pride. The result of 14 grinding years that began with selling used pickups in the rain, funded by a payday loan just large enough to buy 3 battered 1999 trucks. Now, the place gleamed under LED lighting, reflecting the polished sheen of a lineup of Cadillac Escalades and Range Rovers, symbols of luxury, but also a surface so polished that Danielle had begun to question it. She wasn't there just to look anymore. Lately, the complaints had started to drip in, quiet as leaky faucets, about apathetic staff, customers being left stranded in the showroom, and attitudes of disdain toward anyone not wearing a suit or carrying a designer bag. The reports from management still looked clean. Revenue hadn't dipped, but instinct doesn't lie. Something was rotting from within. And Danielle, a 45-year-old woman who once wiped tires herself, wore oil-stained clothes, and fixed the books at midnight, knew she couldn't sit back and wait. No one was going to tell her the truth, unless she was the one to find it. Today, she wouldn't walk into Hartley Auto House as a founder. She would walk in as the new intern from HR, a nobody in a world of luxury vehicles. No cameras, no announcements, no climate-controlled office. Just a stranger in the kingdom she built. She pushed open the glass door. A blast of cool air conditioning hit her face, along with the scent of new leather, a smell she once adored, but now felt oddly distant. Inside the showroom, glossy black floors, ceiling lights casting crisp reflections on the sharp metallic curves of million-dollar machines. But the chill wasn't from the air. It came from the eyes of the first man, who looked at her. "Can I help you?" he asked, indifferent. The name on his tag read, Bryce Maddox, Senior Sales Executive. Danielle gave a faint smile, the kind worn by someone stepping into the lion's den, not out of curiosity, but for justice. "Yes," she replied, her voice even. "I'm the new hire. HR said to come in for onboarding today." Bryce Maddox, his hair neatly parted, navy suit tailored precision, gave her another glance, as if evaluating a pair of outdated shoes mistakenly placed on a premium shelf. "Wesley'll deal with you," he said curtly, then turned and walked off. No name asked, no welcome given. Danielle swallowed the surge rising in her throat. A while later, Wesley Darnell, the training manager, a graying man with tired eyes and the air of someone life had long since betrayed, led Danielle to a worn desk tucked deep in the back of the showroom. He didn't say much. He just dropped a thick new employee handbook onto the desk with a dull thud. "Read it. No one here holds your hand," Wesley muttered, eyes never leaving his phone. "If you see a customer, tell someone else. Other than that, you're on your own." Danielle sat down, her gaze drifting quietly across the space ahead. The showroom floor was still gleaming. The LED lights still danced along the curves of the latest Jaguars. But the atmosphere was dense, cold, disconnected. A group of 3, 2 men and a woman, stood not far off. They were chatting loudly, laughing, making no effort to lower their voices, even with her within earshot. "I give her 2 weeks, said the woman with Ferrari red nails, her tone sharp. "She looks like she walked out of a thrift store parking lot." The guy with slick back hair guffawed. "But she can't tell a Range Rover from a Tahoe." The last one, a burly man with a booming voice, capped it off with a scoff. "HR's hiring anyone who can fog a mirror these days." Danielle pretended to focus on the handbook, but every word pierced like a cold needle. This wasn't just disdain. It was erotic culture, where new hires were treated like burdens and customers were walking dollar signs, not people to be served. Near noon, she watched Bryce, the man who brushed her off that morning, completely ignore an elderly couple walking in. They asked about pricing, about models, but he gave a few dismissive replies, shrugged, and returned to scrolling on his phone. Eventually, the couple left, faces clouded with disappointment and confusion. No one noticed. No one cared that they had just lost what might have been loyal clients, possibly even long-time ones. Danielle clenched her hands against the desk. She hadn't come here expecting to be welcomed, but this went far beyond a bad first day of training. This was a warning. The system was rotting from the inside out. She sat there a long time, pretended to take notes, but inside, a plan was beginning to take shape. She didn't just want to swap a few names on a staff list. She wanted to reset an entire mindset, the idea that only people in suits were worthy of respect. She had once been on the other side, dismissed, misjudged, and she built this empire so no one would ever have to feel that way again. And yet, it was happening, right at the heart of Hartley Auto House. And she, the only one not welcomed, was the only one who could fix it. The break room was tucked behind a side hallway, where yellow fluorescent lights met the stale scent of cold coffee, old cookies, and quiet resignation. Danielle had only stepped in to pour herself a glass of water, but what she heard made her hand freeze at the dispenser. Bryce's voice and a smug laugh echoed clearly from the hallway outside. "That new girl today looks rough," he said, trying to lower his voice, but making no real attempt to hide the contempt. "Guess HR's just pulling people from flea markets now." Another voice joined in, Wesley Darnell, unmistakable. "Yeah, she's exhausting just to look at. Wrinkled t-shirt, hair tied like she's headed to clean out a warehouse. Hartley Auto House sells luxury, not some halfway house for nobodies." Danielle froze mid-step. Paper cup still empty, heart pounding in her chest. But they kept going, like they were sure no one cared enough to listen. "Honestly, she doesn't fit our image," Bryce continued, drawing out every word like a slow sentence being handed down. "Hartley Auto House has to feel premium. Her, she makes you want to turn around and walk out." Chloe Bennett, the woman with the fire-red nails, scoffed. "Yeah, she looks like some temp brought in to refill coffee for the back office. Sell a car? Not a chance." A round of laughter followed. Danielle stood still, her eyes darkening. Those words weren't just insults thrown at a stranger. They were knives to the heart of everything she'd built, with sweat, grit, and a belief that kindness and professionalism weren't exclusive luxuries, but standards everyone deserved. She quietly stepped back, left the break room, and walked the long hall toward the showroom. Everything now felt different. The gleaming vehicles no longer radiated pride. They were polished shells, coating a system rotting from within. Danielle stopped in front of a Lincoln Navigator in the center of the showroom. Old memories surged. Those first sales she closed in a gravel lot, with worn-down shoes and no one believing she'd go far. And now, the people working for her were spreading the very prejudice she once had to fight to survive. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Instead, she nodded as if sealing a plan. She understood now. This wasn't just about attitude. This was a malignant culture, and there was only one way to treat it. But even that wasn't the worst thing she saw that day. As Danielle stood silently at the far end of the showroom, arms still wrapped around the training binder Wesley had slapped on her desk that morning, she kept quietly jotting notes until a moment froze her in place. A customer had just walked in, an elderly man, silver-haired, in a worn dress shirt and scuffed leather shoes, his gaze uneasy among the gleaming sedans. Danielle started to step forward, but before she could, Bryce, the young salesman with his ever-present navy suit and half-smile, and the woman with the crimson manicure, Chloe, intercepted her, moving to block the elderly man's path. The two glanced at him briefly. Bryce smirked. "Probably looking for the bus stop," he said, then turned to Chloe and added, just loud enough for Danielle to hear, "Bet he just came in to grab a free catalog for his fridge." Jessica chuckled, holding up her phone. "Let me live stream him asking the price of an Escalade, then fainting," she said, eyes sweeping across the man like he was a dusty relic in a designer store. The elderly man, unaware he was being mocked, walked toward a Buick, his hand trembling slightly as he reached the door handle. But before he could ask anything, another employee, Louise, passed by and snapped coldly, "These cars aren't for display browsing. If you don't have an appointment, please don't get in the way." Danielle felt the blood drain from her body. She had thought she was prepared to face injustice. But she hadn't imagined that her namesake, the very place she built from scratch with every handshake and dusty lot contract, would become a place where people were humiliated just for not dressing upscale enough. The man lowered his head, gave a slow nod, and quietly turned to leave without saying a word. Danielle watched his thin frame disappear through the glass doors, and she knew she had just witnessed the worst thing. Not declining sales, not staff disrespecting management, but the utter disregard for human dignity. And for her, that was a line. The line no one would cross and stay standing. She pulled out her phone and quietly messaged the one trusted assistant back at headquarters. "Lock today's security footage. Archive all audio files from the break room. I want an all-staff meeting tomorrow night at the showroom. No advance notice." The message was like a silent cut, a blade drawn with precision. Danielle took a deep breath and walked back to her desk. Tomorrow, the truth would be laid bare, like showroom lights across fresh paint, and nothing would be able to hide it. Later that night, Danielle sat alone in the top-floor apartment of a small hotel just a few blocks from the showroom. She hadn't changed clothes. Her t-shirt still held dust from the break room chair. She didn't turn on the lights. Only the laptop screen glowed in the darkness, casting pale light over glassy eyes filled not just with anger, but heartbreak so deep it couldn't even produce tears. On screen was the internal security dashboard, something only she and the senior IT team had access to. She scrubbed back to the footage in the break room, slowing frame by frame, noting every detail, voices, expressions, words, even the laughter. Then she scrolled to the exterior cameras, replaying the moment the elderly couple was brushed off by Bryce. Then the footage of the older man being shamed and sent away by Chloe and Bryce. Every second, every insult, it was all there. What she was doing wasn't just about confirming events. It was about making sure that when she exposed everything, no one would be able to deny a single word. But in the middle of her notes, a new detail appeared on the footage that made her pause. The camera caught Bryce, ringleader of the mockery clique, sneaking open a drawer at the front desk, pulling out a thick stack of files, and quickly shoving them into his blazer. The label flashed for only a few seconds. Customer complaint reports, last 6 months. Danielle pressed her lips together. She had asked Wesley and the management team about those very reports, and always received the same vague response. Just a few minor comments. Nothing significant. And yet here was an entire report being hidden? That meant they knew. They knew exactly how rotten the showroom had become, and chose to bury it even deeper. She leaned back in her chair, one hand pressed against her chest, trying to steady her breathing. Yes, she was angry. But more than anything, she was heartbroken. The team she once trusted hadn't just failed. They had betrayed her and corrupted everything she'd spent her life building. But this time, Danielle didn't plan to lose control. There would be no throwing objects, no screaming matches. She would handle it the way her father once taught her, back in the early days, when she was wiping down car tires under the scorching Savannah sun. When others swing wildly, you hold steady, then strike with precision. Hit the right place, the right moment, and don't let them get back up. Without hesitation, Danielle reached for her phone and called Myra, the head of the company's legal division, the only other person who truly knew what was happening. "I need you to urgently send me all employment contracts, ethics pledges, and every internal complaint report from the Savannah showroom. Everything. I'm holding an emergency all-staff meeting tomorrow. No prior notice." Myra's voice came back calm, but sharp. "Is it that serious?" Danielle replied with just 4 words. "The rot runs deep." The next morning, before the showroom opened, a new sign appeared on the front door. "Showroom temporarily closed for 2 hours due to internal matters. We apologize for the inconvenience. Inside, the atmosphere was taut as a drawn wire. Every staff member, from sales consultants to receptionists, sat in silence on hastily arranged rows of chairs in the middle of the showroom. The gleaming SUVs and sedans stood still, like unwitting spectators to a very real drama about to unfold. Danielle Hartley stepped into the center of the room. This time, she wasn't in disguise. No messy bun, no worn-out sneakers. Just a woman in a sharp black suit, eyes no longer soft, no longer asking. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she inserted a small USB into the laptop already connected to the large screen next to a sleek black Cadillac Escalade. Her eyes scanned the room. From Bryce Maddox, arms crossed, smirking slightly, to Chloe Bennett, fidgeting with her phone, to Wesley Darnell, pretending to review a performance spreadsheet. Before we begin, Danielle spoke, not loudly, but clearly enough for every corner of the showroom to hear. I want you all to watch a short video, a very honest one. Within seconds, the audio from the speaker system froze the room. She looks like she crawled out of a flea market, but she couldn't sell a windshield wiper. Hartley Auto House is hiring people like that now. HR must be bored. She's not the kind of person we need. This showroom isn't for people like her. Bryce, Wesley, Chloe, their voices unmistakable, as if they were standing there, saying it all over again. When the video ended, the final frame appeared. Danielle, in her old jeans and faded tee, standing still in the break room, a cup of water in her hand. She switched off the screen. A strange silence lingered for several seconds. Then Danielle removed her Bluetooth earpiece and stepped forward. I suppose now you know who I am. Some looked confused. A few raised their eyebrows. But most of them were staring at each other, faces pale, as if someone had doused them with cold water. Danielle Hartley, she said, voice even, founder, owner, and the person who laid every single brick for the showroom you're working in. Wesley shot up from his chair. Wait, you're... Yes, she cut him off. The intern you said wasn't fit to sell a side mirror. The woman you bet on, how long before she gave up? Chloe's jaw dropped, her lips moving but no words coming out. Bryce remained seated, trying to hold a neutral expression, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. You didn't just misjudge me, Danielle said, her gaze sharp as steel. You trampled over everything I built with sweat and blood. You didn't just disrespect me. You disrespected every customer who ever walked through those doors, just because they weren't shiny enough by your standards. Then Danielle signaled to her assistant, who began playing clips of customers walking into the showroom, unnoticed, ignored, dismissed, and quietly leaving in disappointment. This time, there wasn't a single cough, not a single shift in a seat. And now, she said, voice low like a thundercloud about to burst, it's time we talk seriously about consequences. The air in the showroom grew heavy, like the moment before a summer storm. Some employees still hadn't recovered from the shock. Others sat with heads lowered, avoiding Danielle's gaze as if they were sitting before a judge, and there was no defense attorney in sight. Danielle Hartley walked slowly around the room, her eyes sweeping over each face, faces she had memorized over the past day while undercover. But she was no longer the confused new intern. She was the owner and the one holding every fate in her hands. Bryce Maddox. Her voice cut through the silence like ice. You were the first to look me up and down like I didn't belong. Then you stood there and let an elderly couple walk out of this showroom without so much as a hello. You didn't just fail as a salesperson, you failed as a human being. Bryce was sweating. He stood up straight but didn't dare speak. Chloe Bennett. Danielle turned to her left. Instead of greeting customers, you filed your nails and gossiped about me like I was a clearance item. You once said, Hartley Auto House sells dreams, not flea market trash. Well, Ms. Bennett, the dream you've been selling is nothing more than hollow arrogance. Chloe flushed crimson. She stepped back, her spine lightly bumping into the Jaguar XJL on display. Yet still, she said nothing. Wesley Darnell. Danielle finally turned a balding man frozen at the edge of his desk in his small office. You're a manager. You should have been the first to notice and correct what was wrong. But what did you do? You mocked, you sneered, you stood by, and you stayed silent when you saw wrongdoing. Wesley opened his mouth, tried to defend himself, but Danielle raised a hand to stop him. Silence, she said, is a form of complicity. She took a deep breath and stood in the center of the showroom, the very floor where customers have been ignored, judged, and dismissed by their appearance. And she made her declaration, effective immediately. The entire sales team, including the 3 individuals I just named, and anyone involved in unethical behavior, is suspended. No exceptions. The room was dead silent. No one moved. Only the hum of the AC and the soft clatter of a half-finished contract slipping to the floor broke the stillness. You think this is punishment? Danielle said, walking toward the large glass doors. It's not. This is your final chance to reflect. Anyone who still wants to stand in this room, under the name Hartley Auto House, must choose a new way to work and a new way to live. She paused, then spoke again, quietly, but with the firmness of a closing verdict. Tomorrow, if you choose to return, bring respect and a spirit of service. If you can't, the door is open, both ways. And with that, Danielle walked out of the showroom, without looking back. She knew the earthquake had begun, and its aftershocks wouldn't fade easily. The next morning at Hartley Auto House, spring sunlight poured through the showroom's vast glass wall, but it did little to ease the weight in the air. The sales team was now barely half its former size. Only those with enough courage had returned after the seismic reckoning the day before. There were no jokes, no whispers, just a thick silence, steeped in anticipation and anxiety. Danielle Hartley emerged from the executive office, a crisp black suit, hair tied high, a thick binder in hand. Standing at the center of the showroom, she locked eyes with each person present. There will be no lecture today, she began. No scolding, just one offer. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight that made everyone swallow hard. She placed a thick stack of documents on the glass table beside a platinum-colored Range Rover. This is the new code of conduct for Hartley Auto House, she said. I spent all night rewriting the cultural foundation of this company. Danielle paused, her eyes like steel as they swept across old and new faces. There will be no more whispers, no more sideways glances, no more laughter at our customers. From now on, we work with respect. We put people above commissions. And if you can't do that, the door is right there. Anyone who agrees, sign your name. If not, no one's forcing you to stay. But if you do stay, I want to see real change. Not just in tone, but in action. The room stayed silent. Some exchanged glances. Others lowered their eyes. Danielle folded her arms, gaze locked on the remaining staff. I'm not asking for perfection, she continued. I'm asking for commitment. Yesterday, I saw what I hate most, contempt. Today, I want to see the one thing that keeps a business alive, integrity. Chloe, who had once mocked Danielle when she was undercover, was the first to step forward. Her hand trembled slightly, but her face was steady. I was wrong, she said. Not because I'm afraid of losing my job, but because I don't want to be the person I was yesterday. She signed her name, then stepped back. Right after, a young employee named Malik, new to the trade, walked forward too. I didn't laugh at you, he said quietly, but I didn't stop them either. I'm sorry. One by one, then 2, then 3 more stepped forward. Not all of them said anything, but each one who signed shared something in common. They no longer looked away. Only one person quietly walked out without a word. Travis, a veteran employee and close friend of Bryce. He gave Danielle one last glance before opening the door and walking out. Danielle didn't stop him. She simply gave a small nod. His decision was a kind of truth, too. Bryce Maddox was nowhere to be seen that morning. Maybe he already knew he no longer belonged. Wesley was the last approach. He looked at Danielle, hesitant. I don't know if there's still a place for me here. Danielle replied evenly. That depends on you. I don't need perfect people. I need people willing to change. And then he signed. Nearly an hour later, only 8 employees remained. Danielle nodded, gathering the signed pledges. "From this moment on, you don't work for Hartley Auto House," she said. "You are Hartley Auto House." The words were soft but final. Just then, the showroom doors opened. A middle-aged couple stepped inside, looking around uncertainly. Danielle glanced toward Chloe. No words were needed. Chloe stepped forward with a polite smile. "Welcome to Hartley Auto House. How can I help you today?" Danielle turned silently and walked toward her office. She knew the real change wasn't in a signature. It was in this moment, when someone who had lost their way chose to find it again. The transformation had begun. The next morning, the Savannah sunlight poured through the vast glass panels of Hartley Auto House, casting a gentle glow over the gleaming luxury cars, a light that seemed to signal a new beginning. There were no more disrespectful laughs echoing across the showroom. No more employees huddled mid-shift, gossiping in corners. Instead, a quiet focus settled over the space, as if everyone was learning how to walk again across the very floor they once took for granted. Luis, the young employee once swept up in the wait-for-wealthy customers mindset, was now the first to rise when a middle-class family walked in. He bent down to greet the child, clinging to his mother's hand with a warm smile, led them to a fuel-efficient SUV, and explained every feature with a patience even he wouldn't have believed he had just a few days ago. Danielle didn't need to issue commands. She simply stood on the second floor, quietly observing, taking note of the little things once dismissed as unimportant. She knew real change didn't begin with speeches. It began the moment people looked inward and chose to do what's right, even when no one was watching, and in a place that had once stood as a symbol of silent arrogance. Danielle now saw glimmers of hope. Piece by piece, Hartley Auto House was being rebuilt, not with pressure, but with pride. A few weeks later, Hartley Auto House was no longer a place Danielle Hartley had to enter in disguise. Now, she walked through the glass doors every morning as herself, her real face, her real name, and was greeted not with fear or flattery, but with respect, not because of her title, but because of her choices. There were no more customers ignored for their outfits, no more cruel laughter echoing behind someone's back. Every employee, whether they had once failed or once stayed silent, was learning how to begin again, this time with a new spirit, to serve not for commission, but for honor. And Danielle knew honor didn't come from million-dollar deals. It came from things like Luis taking the time to explain financing to a single mother. It came from the grateful look of a veteran when Chloe offered to help him apply his military discount. It came from small, quiet acts, not flashy, but real. Danielle didn't need applause. She didn't need a trophy or a Leader of the Year plaque. What she wanted, and what she finally achieved, was a team that no longer feared being watched, because they had learned to hold up a mirror to themselves. Because in a world so easily swept up in profit and appearances, Danielle Hartley proved something deeper. That real success doesn't come from where you sit in the office, but from how you rise in a crowd, even in the lowest role. And remind everyone why we started. Hartley Auto House had regained its soul, and Danielle Hartley knew, without anyone needing to say it, that she had just earned the most meaningful victory of her life.